Welcome to Belong and Bloom, a sanctuary for Black women to rest, heal, and grow.
I'm Marianne.
And I'm Vanetta. We're qualified therapists and coaches, and we're so glad you're here.
This is a space to slow down, gain perspective, and reconnect with your purpose, power, and peace.
Through honest conversations and shared wisdom, we'll explore what it means to truly belong to ourselves and to our community.
Healing isn't a solo journey. It's something we grow into together. When we belong, we bloom. I'm so excited about really being able to continue our conversation around confidence and boldness. Mm-hmm. And, something that Vanetta and we've been speaking about, haven't we, is recognizing that there's two sides of confidence, in that there's the internal side where we can do things to support our sense of courage, our sense of just that self-efficacy with things, and that's great. But we also need to recognize the external impact of confidence. Environment is important. It can help to build us up, lift us up, but our environments and societal influences can also tear us down, and it can play a real impact, a real role in our confidence as well. So today, that's what we're wanting to unpack, aren't we, Vanetta? Really going into the reality of what is involved in supporting people's confidence, and what's also involved in diluting and tearing down people's confidence as well.
Yeah, because we, as you've said, we've both very much believed that we're doing everyone a disservice if we only tell one side of the story, if we don't highlight the systemic issues that impact on our confidence and on our courage. It's not fair to everyone who's listening, to our clients, to ourselves, because we don't live in a vacuum.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Vanetta, what I was thinking of, I was just reflecting on this, and I was realizing that we are so much more connected as human beings because of social media. And we are relating to each other through Instagram, through LinkedIn, through TikTok, and even on our phones, WhatsApp, etc. And it's a great thing because it means that we get to understand each other's stories, lives. It's a beautiful knowledge exchange. And that can also boost people's confidence, to see people who look like them, to feel encouraged by people's experiences, gleaning knowledge, people's wisdom. Fantastic. Great confidence boost. But also, it can also cause us to start to compare ourselves to other people. And with a lot of the clients I work with, they will say that social media, TikTok, Instagram, has played a real role in them feeling less than, or feeling like others are thriving and doing really well. And then they look at their own circumstances and they sort of feel like they have many limitations and shortcomings. I don't know if you've noticed that as well, especially like with the clients that you've been working with, for example, or even people in your circle.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of clients where we've spoken about, low self-esteem, anxiety, and it's not even anything that I've said, oh, you should do, because that's not what counseling or therapy is about. But clients would be like, well, I've tried being off social media for a little bit, and that's really given me peace of mind. I'm like, interesting, So it's definitely a pattern that I've recognized with clients, but also for myself, to be fair. It's been years kind of been away from the social media bubble. I'll dip into it sometimes, but I realize for myself it's healthier for my mental health to not be on it constantly.
Yeah, because there's a theory called social comparison theory. Have you come across that, Vanetta?
It sounds familiar, but I'm happy for you to.
Yeah. So it's basically the idea of like how we measure ourselves, and we almost measure ourselves based on other people and what they are achieving. So as human beings, we naturally compare ourselves. It's a thing. But if we're constantly, so there's this idea of upward comparison, and there's also downward comparison. So upward comparison is when we compare ourselves to people who we think are better than us, or who are thriving, or who are a few steps ahead of us. If we constantly do that, what that does is it actually erodes our confidence. And what we're seeing with social media is everyone that's on there is usually sharing their best self on social media. Or even if they share their worst self, they share it in a way that just feels so empowered. That's not natural to how we really live as human beings, And so what happens is, when we're constantly exposed to people's thriving stories, it causes us to feel less than. And sometimes that's where guilt and shame kick in. Like, why aren't I overcoming these challenges in the same way that person is overcoming these challenges? Why aren't I further along? We have similarities in our backgrounds and our experiences, but that woman, that lady, seems to have done more, and she's got a whole community around her. And so the more we're exposed to environments where we feel that others are better than ourselves, the more we start to question our own worth, our own achievements. And so that's something that I always encourage people to think about. What are you exposing yourself to? And what are the messages you are essentially allowing to come in? Because those messages might be the very things that tear you down internally and cause you to doubt and second guess your abilities as well. Yeah.
That's it. It's so powerful. And I guess it goes back to this concept of narrative therapy that you've introduced before, Marianne, about the stories that we tell about ourselves and the stories that others tell of us as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, with that whole thing about, limiting and critical thinking or limited beliefs, sometimes it's around reframing as well. When we always there was a quote from let me find the quote, actually, because I really enjoyed this quote that I shared the other day, which is from Maya Angelou, and she talks about when we look at a butterfly, we admire the butterfly, and we think it's beautiful, but we don't always recognize the journey that it has taken to come to that place. And we have to recognize that we as human beings, we can admire other people and their achievements and what they've gone through, but we're also going through our own process. The seasons of, the valley seasons are shaping us so that we can be able to enjoy that flourishing just in the same way that a butterfly flourishes. So in a way, when we are hearing other people's stories, especially on social media, for example, being able to allow ourselves to be inspired by them rather than turning it into a place of judgment where we start to judge ourselves and criticize ourselves. And to know that our story, it will also be a beautiful story and it's going to bless someone else. But just recognizing that it's not about comparing ourselves to someone else, but recognizing that we're running our own race. And we are essentially competing with ourselves, because we will always be with ourselves. We will never leave ourselves and we can only be ourselves. And just taking that time of having that space for self-acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. What you just shared reminds me of a quote, and I actually need to look at who says it, because I've been saying it a lot recently, because this is coming up about wherever we are, it's still us, and I think there's this quote that says that wherever I go, there I am. It's
I love that.
So whatever we bring with ourselves will continue to stay with us until we actually take the time to challenge it, to seek transformation, to seek help and healing wherever we can.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And of course, we've spoken about social media, but you know what? We've got to call out the elephant in the room, which for us, especially as Black women, we have to recognize racism. We have to recognize all the things that come with a society that is skewed, a society that discriminates, and the impact of that on the Black experience.
Exactly. And I think something to start with, because I feel like the R word is being used so much and then has been blocked by people, and people are doing, book burnings and whatever else, or book bannings in schools, and because they don't understand what it means, or their definition is that whenever you mention that anything is racist, it means that, oh, the black race has to be superior to the white race, when it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I feel like one thing that would be useful for us is to kind of have a working definition of what we mean when we talk about racism. And something that I've brought up here, because I remember finding it quite interesting, reading a book, the book by Ibrahim X. Kendi, How to Become an Anti-Racist. So this was a book that was, going around, or making its rounds again and again during the 2020 COVID pandemic, George Floyd, Black Lives Matters, all of this. And I ended up spending some time with my husband going through the book systematically and kind of studying the concepts. I thought it's important to understand what conversations people are having. And Professor Kendi mentioned that this is one of the reasons why racism is such a controversial topic, when it really shouldn't be controversial, is because we don't agree on its definition. So if we're already on different starting point positions, we're never going to come to some sort of an agreement in the middle. So definitions are, by definition, really important. We need to understand where you're starting from when you use the word racism.
What definition would you use?
So I now kind of go by what I've read in the book, which is the fact that racism is actually a collaboration of concepts. So Professor Kendi defines it as a marriage of racist policies and racist ideas that produce and normalize racial inequalities. So racism itself is an intersection of policies, ideas, and inequities. And so when we're saying, okay, well, you've just said the marriage of racist policies, what does racist mean? So racist, or anything that is racist, is any concept that suggests that one racial group is inferior to or superior to another in any way.
So exactly.
About ethnic differences, we're not talking about, there might be differences in physiology. We're talking about the fact that as soon as we make a particular racial group, which I hope all understand are not biological, but it's a social concept, any particular racial group inferior or superior to another, we are in the realm of being racist. And another thing that Professor Kendi mentions, which at the time was like really revelatory to me, is that we've attached so much baggage to this word being racist that nobody wants to be racist. But the reality is, he's saying, rather than racism or being racist being like a permanent tattoo that brands you, it's like a peelable name sticker. Those ones that you get at conferences and everywhere else. Like at any given moment in time, you could be engaging in racism, and at any moment in time, you could be engaging in anti-racism. It literally, what are you doing? Are you proliferating policies and ideas that are racist, or are you actually doing the opposite of that? And so I feel like it for me, it's changed the way I look at the whole concept, because suddenly it's no longer a condemnation of your whole character and personality, and more so a critical analysis of what behaviors and ideas you are allowing and permitting around.
And from what you're saying, it's recognizing, when we use the term systemic, recognizing that it's a whole system thing. There's multiple stakeholders, systems, processes, things that are feeding into this idea of racism. It's not just at the level of one person to another. It's how society has been constructed. It's how policy has been formed, etc. So
exactly. One of the things that I think of when I think about racist policies, because I was literally having this conversation with somebody the other day, So I don't know if you know about the NICE organization. I'm just trying to remember what the abbreviation is for.
Yeah.
NICE is so the healthcare organization in the
Yeah.
UK.
Yeah.
I think it's National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And talking about racist policies, a couple of years ago, there was a conversation and consideration, because they actually put it in writing, to say that relating to maternal health and maternal outcomes, and there was the conversation about for Black and brown women to consider inducing them at 38 weeks. So making this the common practice within the UK.
Oh.
And that was going to be their response to the maternal mortality rates, the differences in maternal mortality rates. So we might have heard the 5 times more.
Yeah.
You know, that Black women are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth. I think it went down to 4 times. I think it's gone down a little bit more, but it's still more than white women. And so the NICE consideration at the time was, oh, well, we've looked at the data, and maybe the best thing to do is bring their due dates forward, so induce them at 38 weeks, rather than recognizing the reason that in itself is a racist policy, because you are expressing and basically saying that Black women can't make it to 40 weeks. That there's biologically a difference within bodies, and that's why we need to save what Black women and induce their pregnancies at 38 weeks rather than carry them through to 40, where a lot of them are dying in childbirth, not realizing that the reason that this is happening is not because of differences in bodies, but it's because of how the system, like you were just saying, is responding differently to the Black mother than to the white mother.
Yeah, exactly. And so even in what you've said, it's almost, once again, it's instead of trying to fix the system, in a way, what you've described, it's denying the true experience of the Black woman, because actually the way to fix it is go, well, what can we be doing in the healthcare system to ensure that these women are advocated for, that they're looked after, that we don't ignore their pain, but we actually seek to show that care and that compassion for them. That is what should be needed, rather than, oh, let's just induce early, cause more stress and strain for them and their bodies, and probably lead to maybe further issues down the line for them and their children. It's an ignoring of that person's humanity and their experience, but it's just going, let's, there's a problem here, let's fix it, but we're not really fixing the true problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So tying that back then to confidence, if you as a Black mother are in that place where doctors around you are pushing you to be induced at 38 weeks, even though you're not high risk, there's no anything that's othering you other than the color of your skin, how does that then impact on your confidence?
Yeah.
It's hard to be audacious in those moments.
Yeah, because it's really exhausting, isn't it? It makes you realize that confidence can then be very context dependent, because not every environment is a safe environment. Not every environment can you show up feeling like you can really be your true self, because you're probably in fear that you're not going to be looked out after properly, or you're already assuming or anticipating either a microaggression there, or you're anticipating something being unfair over there, and so you're not actually able to relax, and you're not able to then, because we know that when we are in that state of relaxation, our bodies are in a place where it feels regulated, then we feel safe to be ourselves. We feel safe to laugh and to enjoy the moment and to really relate with those who are there. We feel safe to express our thoughts and our feelings. But oftentimes, especially as Black people, we are in a place of heightened stress. That stress hormone is bouncing around in our bodies. We are in a constant state of hypervigilance, and that being, oh my gosh, like, you know, what's going to happen this time? What is that manager going to say to me? Or what is that healthcare professional going to ignore this time? Or so we're constantly having our shoulders up like this, and we're constantly in our minds about, oh, I've got to make sure that I defend myself, I advocate for myself, that we don't actually have the time to relax, to enjoy the moment, to enjoy the situation, and to show up fully as ourselves, because we're busy trying to be defensive and to protect ourselves. And so it can really knock our confidence.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's this you know, the concept of weathering. Have you, I think I mentioned this a few months ago, but this idea that for especially for Black people, let's say what happens is when we are in a constant state of feeling attacked, feeling like we're exposed to microaggressions, feeling like we're constantly having to fight against the system in various ways, what it does is it actually means that our bodies are in that, like I said, that flight or fight state constantly. We end up having like hormone, like the stress hormone, cortisol, bouncing around in our bodies constantly, and that's going to wear down our bodies. You know, it's going to have a physiological effect on us. And this is why you end up seeing so many. I mean, I think about, you know, in family members, communities that I know, like you see the Black auntie who has she has her high blood pressure medication, her back is hurting, you know, all these things. And where does that come from? And that comes from constantly being in the state of stress, chronic stress. And it ends up having a physical impact on our bodies. And so the concept of weathering is almost as though like our bodies are like being weathered away. We're being like depleted and drained because of what's happening societally. So there's been a stat to say that Black women, in terms of our lifespan, our lifespan is shortened compared to non-Black women because of the very many racial and discriminatory experiences we have, that it causes us to be so worn down in many ways that it actually affects our lifespan. So I say all of this so we recognize the impact of being in a system that is racist, being in a system that is discriminatory. It's a deep and big impact. And we need to recognize that so we can give ourselves grace when we don't always show up easily and consistently as our best self, where we don't always have the energy to be our confident self, because sometimes life is truly lifing. And especially if you are Black, it is lifing in its own very unique way.
That's it. Exactly. And I think it's that part that you're saying about self-compassion. I think that's one thing I'm realizing working with my clients. I kind of have a bit of a running joke with most of my clients that Vanetta is always going to talk about self-compassion, because I'm like, yeah, because nobody else is going to do that for you. You know, it's really important that we be tender and gentle with ourselves, because the world that we face isn't tender and gentle from the outset towards us. So it's important that we recognize what are the things that we are facing in our day-to-day. How is that impacting on how I feel about myself, about the world, about God? How is it impacting on what I think? And how is it impacting on how I behave? Like one of the theories that I've been, or people that I've been really drawn to recently is Dr. Raquel Martin. I think I might have mentioned her. So she's like this liberation psychologist, and liberation psychology is really about understanding context, giving context, I guess a voice, rather than just looking at the individual and the individual's symptoms and the individual's issues. We're recognizing the context in which the individual is living in. And one of the things that she talks about is that so often symptoms are actually systemic factors compressed. So the symptoms of the individual, if you're dealing with anxiety, if you're dealing with depression, so often it's seen as an individual issue that you are that you are to juggle with and blame, and not recognizing that actually the root of that is systemic. In most, the root of that is systemic. So when we're talking about, oh well, you're not confident enough, you just to put your chin up and lean in and all these kind of things, you're missing out on what the system is doing and how that is impacting on how you're feeling.
Yeah. And that is linked to self-compassion, isn't it? It's recognizing that you can't put all the weight of responsibility on yourself to just be okay. You've got to recognize the context in which you're living in. And I guess what we're saying by really talking about the impact of racism and microaggression is that it does knock our confidence. It knocks our confidence because, it's increasing our mental load and us having to be hyper vigilant so that we don't feel like we're being attacked from every side. Sometimes it can impact our own perception of ourselves. It causes us to second guess ourselves. It does happen. You see this all the time. People will go for jobs and they are exceptional at what they do, but they somehow have been they've been told that they don't quite fit the criteria. But they'll look at another colleague and you're like, they don't even have half of the credentials that I do, but they've been given the role. And so it starts making you sort of question your own sense of self. And also, I guess it can drain you emotionally. It can drain your cognitive resources, your thinking, your emotions. And these are all the things that confidence relies on. Confidence does rely on you feeling a sense of belonging. Confidence does rely on you having a positive self-perception. Confidence does rely on you being in environments that feel psychologically safe. And so it's just good for us to recognize that you can't always put the weight of responsibility on yourself to just be confident. Your environment does make a huge difference.
Exactly. The way you navigate the world is dependent on how the world receives you when you go into it. Well,
It's a good point. Because I'm thinking to myself then, Vanetta, like, what do people do about this? Like, we've spoken about all the things that impact confidence. But we also want to have that sense of hope in terms of how do we overcome this? What do we do to help ourselves to be aware of the environment we're in, but to have tools or toolkit for overcoming and allowing ourselves to show up confidently and boldly despite all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a good question. And one of the things that you mentioned is, okay, there's a sense of belonging that ties into confidence. How can we foster and develop that sense of belonging in spaces that are safe? You've mentioned that already. How do we, who's our tribe? Who are people around us that will cheerlead us, no matter what the world may be throwing at us? Who are the people that will stay true to us and to stay true to their role in our lives, to remind us of our strengths, remind us of our abilities, remind us of what we are capable of, but also who are the people who will just remind us of the fact that we're loved regardless of what we produce.
It's so true. I was reading somewhere, let me see if I can find it. I was reading somewhere this idea of the importance of recognizing that confidence grows from evidence, not just mindset. And from that, it's like creating opportunities where we can gather evidence that we do carry worth, we do carry value, what we do does matter, we do have purpose. And sometimes that evidence comes from others, the relationships that we have, our community, our tribe. And sometimes I'll say to my coaching clients and my counseling clients, I'll say, why don't you do a little bit of like go out to 5 people that I'm sure other people have heard of this, but like go out to 5 people that and ask them to describe 3 top strengths that they see in you as a person. Ask them to tell you the impact that they see you having already make in
Mm.
your life and in the lives of others, and the
Mm-hmm.
impact that they know you will make.
Mm.
Ask people to tell you the areas in which they wish you could be bolder in,
Oh, okay.
and they are confident that you can be bolder
Mm-hmm.
in that area. Ask them to tell you their wildest dream for you. Yeah.
Ooh,
Uh,
what mm.
and sometimes that's exciting just to hear someone speak that truth into your life, in terms of like, I see you, I hear
Mm.
you, I understand you, and I know you, and I
Yeah,
want you to be able to understand how you are experienced and how you're seen. And
yeah.
hearing from other people is evidence that's very difficult to refute, because this is someone else who, to be honest, they don't need to say all these things about you, but they want to let you know the truth
Mhm.
that's out there that you might have been missing. So I encourage everyone to do that. Get in
Yeah.
touch with 5 different people, not everyone from just the same circle. It could be someone from work, someone, a few good friends of yours, someone from church or another community you're in. And then once you get all that feedback, have a look at the patterns, have a look
Mm.
at the similarities, what's jumping out, because that can really boost our confidence as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I love that question. What is your wildest dream for me? Because I was
Yes.
like, when you started off the question, what's your wildest dream? Obviously, in my head, it was like for you. And I was like, well, not everybody's going to want to share that. But actually, yeah, what's your wildest dream for me? That's brilliant. That's
Yeah.
such a good question. And
Yeah.
I know that you love questions because they unlock so much more.
Yeah, they do. Because oftentimes what happens is people see us and they are excited for us. And being
Mm.
able to ask that question, what is your wildest dream for me? It
Mm.
allows sometimes people to vocalize a level of achievement and aspiration that we ourselves are too scared to vocalize. Sometimes we
Mm.
have a fear of success as human beings because it just seems too much, or it seems too wild. But to
Mm.
have someone else speak that,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, it's so powerful. And what happens is we can't bat it away
Mm-hmm.
because they're the ones speaking.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so it's very encouraging and uplifting. So yeah, I dare everyone to
Mm-hmm.
do that, to go and
Yeah,
ask people that question.
I love that. And I also love what you said with regards to confidence being more about evidence than feeling. Um,
Mm.
because the other evidence is the social proof, which is what you just
Yes.
this explained. But another thing that I love supporting clients in as well is recognizing kind of like the internal proof, in that where
Yes.
have you made a commitment to yourself and you've actually kept it? Because so
Yeah.
often I'm into counseling or coaching and I'm like, oh, I need to be better, I need to do this better, I need to have this habits, that, healthy habits, I need to exercise, I need to journal, I need to pray, whatever it is. It's always like I need to do better.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love doing is supporting my clients and recognizing where are you already sticking to your word for yourself.
Yeah.
Where's the
Yeah.
evidence that you can trust you?
Yeah. That's so beautiful. Where is that evidence that you can trust you? That's so
Yeah.
beautiful. I love what you're saying, Vanetta. I love that because it's true. And it goes back to that real sense of self worth, isn't it? Where we learn to value ourselves, value our thoughts, value our own contributions.
Mm.
That's, yeah, because we'll always have ourselves. So we might as well start trusting ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I really
Yeah.
love that.
And
I really,
starting with little things, because again, often in the bigger things that we want to achieve, we feel like, well, I've tried to, I don't know, lose weight like however many years and it's not happened. It's like, okay, let's look at where has it worked? Where have you been consistent about the things that you wanted to be consistent about? Oh,
mm.
you've got 800-day streak on Duolingo. Okay. In Spanish, you've been consistent for over a year, over 2 years. You've been consistent for over 2 years in that. Well done. Let's break down, and this would obviously be more so from a coaching side. Let's break down what is making you come back to this? What is motivating you to fulfill this habit, in contrast to others that you feel like you're short on?
Yeah.
Let's look at the growth and that's already happening, the consistency that's already happening, and deconstruct why that is happening, and then see how we can apply it to other areas.
That's so lovely, because it's what you're doing is you're tying it to that idea of like your sense of worth isn't tied to only to achievement,
Yeah.
and it's almost trying to build your identity around like your values, not just the outcomes. The fact that you've even started the journey of wanting to learn a language, that's incredible. The fact that you are starting a journey of wanting to lose weight, well done you. So it's just recognizing actually it's not just about the outcomes, it's that journey as well, the values that are behind it as well. Yeah.
So we're saying, so part of confidence we're talking about that isn't connected to the systemic is that sense of belonging. We've also said kind of the sense of self-worth, and how that ties into how do you in what areas are you consistent with what you're saying? Where can you trust yourself? Is there any other thing that you feel like, as we're talking about, how do we walk out or come out and stand out audaciously? Are there any other things that
so relationships, I guess, so your relationship with yourself, your relationship with others, that's what I guess we've covered. I think it's also just being aware of the I'm trying to think. I think being aware of the environment that you're in. And so like we said, it could be you're experiencing microaggressions, racism, or anything else. It could be anything else. The environment that you're in might be an environment that's just, it's not a supportive environment. You might just have whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Recognizing the environment so that you can think, as I step into this environment, whatever that environment is, whether it's your workplace, whether it's your community or the city you're in, whatever, what is it that I'm needing to allow me to remember who I am so that I don't forget it? What is it that I'm needing to allow me to prioritize the things that really matter in this season so I don't lose my sense of direction or focus? What are the things that cause me to have my backup? How can I anticipate that and do something about that? So adjusting your rhythms, your routines, your self-talk, your thoughts, because the environment you're in might cause you to shrink or whatever. So just being aware of the environment and what might be needed in that particular time or season, or I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think another part, which is obviously something that we do, is looking at therapy, but looking at it from a culturally attuned lens. Like, where are there therapists, counselors, coaches that you can get in contact with that can support you on your journey, who understand your lived experience? And I would go as far to say not just from a textbook understanding, but actually because they also have it.
Yes, that is so true. And we are big advocates for people seeking therapy that really aligns with their values and their belief systems. There's something powerful about going into that space where you feel seen, you feel heard, and you don't feel like you've got to explain your story and you've got to go through it's long, and it's just so powerful finding a therapist or even a coach, if that's what you're wanting, that really has that sense of lived experience understanding of whether it's your culture, whether it's your race, whether it's your faith. It's really powerful, for sure. I know for me, for example, I just feel so empowered when I have clients come to me and they say, I'm so excited that I found you, Marianne, because you are a Black therapist, you're also a Christian therapist, and you're also a woman. And to be able to find that it's like second to none. And I just feel so encouraged when someone feels a real sense of relief around that. And I'm sure you get that too, Vanessa.
Yes, absolutely. The most of the time, because I always ask my clients the question of, what made you reach out to me in particular. So not the presenting issue, but actually what made you think actually Vanetta might be the person. And it's always Black Christian woman.
Yeah.
That's what stands out,
Yeah. And it's powerful. And so even as we search for help and support and resources, we need to not be ashamed about what we are needing. If
Yeah.
you feel like you need a counselor that's a woman, a counselor that's Black, a counselor that's a Christian, whatever it is, it could be something else that you want.
Mm-hmm.
Lean into that, because that's what you're needing. And you don't need to tell yourself, oh no, faith doesn't matter, race doesn't matter, because you're just lying to yourself. If you genuinely need that, lean into it. If you don't need that, that's fine. But if you genuinely need that, that's what self-compassion looks like. That's you going against the grain and saying, actually, I need to prioritize these things because they matter to me and they're going to be important to me and my journey of self-confidence and growth.
That's it.
Look at that. Well, I feel like we've covered this, haven't we?
I feel like we have.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited because I know that this is such an important topic, and you and I, Vanetta, are going to be running some workshops around this, because we know so many women are struggling with really being able to show up fully in their boldness and their confidence unapologetically. And we want to be able to unpack this more. So yeah, really looking forward to running some workshops on this.
Yeah, same here. Ultimately, for us, it's about supporting people in finding freedom, and because that is really the biggest flex, being free. That is what is allowing us to be our most audacious self, feeling free to do so. So
yeah. And this is going to sound cheesy, but this is called Belong and Bloom. And when we belong first within ourselves and we feel that sense of self-acceptance and self-compassion, it then gives us also it helps to boost our confidence, because we are accepting of ourselves. And when we feel a sense of belonging with others, then we feel seen and we feel like we matter and we're not invisible. And so really being able to create that space where you can reflect and you can understand who you are through therapy, through coaching, through journaling is important. And also being able to find communities and people that can be supportive to you and allow you to feel seen is super important as well, because then that leads to the blooming, the flourishing, the radiance, the confidence. So thought I'd chat that in there.
There was a reason why we named it what we named it. It all makes sense.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to more conversations, Vanetta.
Same here, Marianne.
Thank you for spending this time with us here at Belong and Bloom.
We hope today's conversation offered you a moment to breathe, reflect, and remember you are not alone on this journey.
If this episode spoke to you, share it with a sister, a friend, or a loved one who might need the same reminder.
And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. Until next time, take care.
And keep blooming.